we'll go ahead and start this off, continued from last week.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we're here to have a continuation of our conversation around traffic safety on Johnson Drive and the potential installation of a traffic signal at the intersection of Johnson Drive and Woodson. We do have Todd Frederickson with Woodson is here with us this evening, so Todd can help. He's a traffic engineer and he can help answer whatever questions that we might have as we walk through this process. What I thought we might do, what I heard coming out of last week, and then several of you contacted me and said we'd like, we've had these 4 areas of concern: speed, pedestrian safety, turning onto Johnson Drive, and backing out of the parking stalls. Were the issues that we've sort of been talking about and studying and thinking and trying to resolve over the last really 18 months to almost 2 years. I heard, what options and alternatives do we have to address each one of those? What have we done to date to address each one of those? And then can we have some estimated costs of what we spent to date and estimated costs for each of the solutions? So really, I think the best thing to do is going to be, I tried to put this in a matrix format. For me, as I sat down and tried to look at it, that became the easiest, just to say, hey, here's what the option is, here are the pros and cons, and I don't know that I've captured all of them. This has been a work in progress even up to 3 o'clock this afternoon. Any other considerations? And then just trying to mark on the right-hand side which of those areas of concern that particular alternative or option addresses or helps to solve. What was difficult to show in this matrix is a degree of helping, but that's something we can talk about as we go through this process. The rest of what is included in your packet, historically, we have some information which, when we get to that or as we get to it, the chief and his staff pulled together regarding citations and accident information, and we went back to 2015, 16, and then year-to-date in 2017. The road was opened, the Johnson Drive in its new alignment was opened in November of 2014. So that gives you about a little more than a 2-year perspective over what we've seen there. And I think that's going to be one of the things as we walk through the options and alternatives, because I hear kind of a common theme of, we want to make Johnson Drive safer. And so I think it's important to think about how we're going to measure whether we've accomplished that goal. That's our goal. The other thing I'm passing around right now is I had asked you last week to do your mock on-camera interview on the front steps of City Hall and send me your responses to those questions. And so everybody did. I told you not to think about it, just give me your gut reaction. Top 3 issues facing mission in the next 1 to 2 years. One thing in the city that you could snap your fingers and change overnight, what would it be? And then what would you just sort of stand on the rooftops and shout? And I hand this out tonight only because I know there's been some conversation around where this might fall, this issue of traffic safety in terms of priority. So I wanted to just sort of capture that, and we'll spend a lot more time thinking about this and talking about these as we move through the budget. But you can see that issue did pop up on that list. If you see a bulleted item and it has a number behind it, it means, so Gateway, for example, 5 of you included Gateway as at the top of your list. 3 included streets and roads, and then some of these other subcategories. So that's just kind of a reference point. We won't spend really much time on that. The other thing that is included in this packet are 4 different resolutions that have been passed going all the way back to 2006. So the design and configuration and functionality of Johnson Drive has been talked about for a very, very, very long time. And it's gone through a series of changes. If you start with the earliest resolution back from 2006, it was coming off of a Johnson Drive task force, citizen task force, and they actually were recommending a 3-lane configuration at that point. Then we went through a lot of public comment and discussion and concern around that recommendation. And ultimately, as we moved closer to the design of the project, you'll see that in March 2011 is the first time that we specifically say in a resolution that we're going to maintain the 4-lane configuration through that section of Johnson Drive. So going back all the way to 2006, we were looking at number of lanes all the way from Road to Lamar. And so there's 4 lanes, Road to Roland Drive, then it goes 3 lanes, Roland Drive to Knoll, and then the 4-lane configuration from Knoll to Lamar. And then the last two really stress as much the pedestrian improvements and the goal of focusing on addressing the pedestrian equally with the automobile. And so that obviously played into the design element. So again, that's really there to just provide some historical perspective. We've also included some information from Bike Walk KC in the packet, and Emily, as we go through kind of the alternatives that may touch on, can give us some additional information on who Bike Walk KC is and how long they've sort of been involved in the conversation. And then Nick had found and had forwarded me earlier this week some information that he had found, and so I shared the link to that website in the packet. So I think, unless somebody has a different idea, I thought we might just start walking through the matrix and the options and alternatives, and then as you have questions, please just stop us. So the first item that included is a reduction in the speed limit. And we have already done that. That speed limit change went into effect in February of 2017. Reduction from 30 miles per hour to 25 miles per hour. If you look at the citation data that the police department provided, you can see that the citation numbers for speeding are way up. They're double in just the first quarter of 2017 what they were in all of 2016. And that's really just attributed to the focus that we've had on speed enforcement through that corridor. In 2016, we were more focused on pedestrian and crosswalk enforcement as to speed. So obviously that is an option that impacts the entire length of that corridor. Some of the downside is it does require enforcement for it to be effective. And in some respects, having that inside lane with 4 lanes still gives drivers a sense that they can go faster. That's kind of perceived as that through lane. And we've spent about $700 to date on changing out the speed limit signs. Estimated cost there would just be whatever we determine in terms of personnel costs for dedicated traffic enforcement, and we address that down below. And so to a certain extent, a reduction in the speed limit we expected would impact, obviously, the concern about speed, the concerns about pedestrian safety, turning or crossing onto Johnson Drive and backing from the parking stall. So it was intended to measure or impact each one of those areas. And as you can see, the accident data, we tried to provide it at the various intersections along the Johnson Drive corridor. And then we also gave you some comparisons at some of our other top accident intersections throughout the city, so you can kind of see how those numbers compare. But you can see in 2015 there were a total of 11 accidents along that Johnson Drive corridor, Lamar Tunnel, 22 in 2016, and we've had 4 year-to-date in 2017.
Do we know what the accidents are attributed to? Like, did somebody hit a pedestrian? Was there a DUI involved? Do we know what the...
There was only one accident last year in this corridor on Johnson Drive that was crosswalk related. And that one was a car actually stopped for somebody in the crosswalk, and the person behind him hit the car in front of him. And that's generally what you get on Johnson Drive, and it's not just in this corridor, it's all the way down. It's Johnson and Broadmoor, people are in stoplights. But most of what we get in the corridor is people backing up. A few of us were at a meeting, and then we saw an accident down on Johnson Drive this last year, and we drove down. Somebody had backed out on Johnson Drive and decided to pull a U-turn across all 4 lanes of traffic and hit 2 other cars. So I mean, that's mainly what we're seeing. And I told you guys that the mayor and I were walking my kids across the street for the farmer's market. My wife was out of town, and kids almost got hit. So it is scary, but when you look at the data is not showing that we're having an accident problem when you look at it compared to other places in our city. So, and that's why we wanted to put that on, and also give you guys some of the data from some of the other spots in the city that there's higher accident rates in our city than that downtown corridor. So, not that it's not important, but.
Any other thoughts, comments about this reduction in the speed limit?
I think for the investment, it's kind of a no-brainer in my mind. Talking under $1,000 to change out the signs, and then there's probably some added ongoing personnel costs, but it's going to have a positive impact. Not going to solve all the problems, it's definitely going to help. I think it already has helped a little bit. But it's not that expensive, we didn't have to invest a ton of money, and if there is some unintended consequence, it's easy to go back to.
So let's skip down, I'm going to skip speed tables and we'll come back to that. So I did put increased traffic enforcement as one option. You know, obviously that presence of an officer and or the speed trailer on Johnson Drive tends to slow drivers down. The negatives, as we saw them, were that it might cause Johnson Drive to be perceived as a speed trap and result in some negative publicity. The estimated cost was really just, that's obviously going to depend on the direction. I picked 4 hours a week, just thinking a regular and routine presence in some fashion down there. That would kind of be a start for that. And the $30 an hour is salary and benefits for the police officer. So you're looking at about $6,200 a year. We're kind of saying we want to spend 4 hours a week or so on Johnson Drive. Other considerations, we could use a speed trailer in lieu of the officer on the street, but then you don't have the ability to issue a citation, obviously. So you get people stepping on their brakes, but there's no consequence as a result of speeding necessarily. And then I think we don't know how that may be perceived by the business owners along that corridor. And the increased traffic enforcement does address the concerns of speed and pedestrian safety.
The one thing that I see missing that may not anybody else, but a low-cost way of at least communicating our public service announcements in the magazine, on the website, and on the radio. From time to time, just letting people know, if you decide to complain about tickets, you better slow down because we have lowered the speed limit and we are supporting that speed limit and hoping that you'll follow the law because you'll be ticketed if you don't. I don't know what else we've used with PSAs before, but it seems to have, that may be one of the lower cost ones that we could at least kind of measure getting any impact.
And I know, Emily, you can probably speak more to this about our efforts to do sort of pedestrian education last year along the corridor.
Right, and yeah, the two-way street, I mean, we talked about it here before, about educating drivers, but also educating pedestrians about how to approach the crosswalk and how to look, make eye contact, all that kind of thing, and try to really come at it from a positive direction. Also to communicate to the drivers that we're talking to the pedestrians too, and vice versa, that it's kind of we all work together, share the road, that kind of thing. But I agree with you, I mean, the lowering of the speed limit, it has had some negative publicity on social media and things like that, the things that we're all familiar with, but also I think it's been well received in a lot of circles as well, and it's that everyone, it's an effort, and it's putting your, it's making an effort to just protect the pedestrians and make it a friendly option, and you've all spoken to that.
Even a message sent to driver's ed at North would be helpful. As you're getting the license and you're out, please note that the speed limit from this point to this point has changed from 30 to 25. Don't have your first ticket be on Johnson Drive.
Can I ask a question? I noticed in 2016 there was the 22 accidents on Johnson Drive.
Correct.
Do we know whether these are people going from point A to B just to get through Mission fast? We don't know whether they were a shopper and they just backed out or they just happened to hit a car.
Yeah, they could have been passing through to get home in the fairway, or they could have been shopping in Fluffy Fresh, or we don't know.
Okay, so we don't know whether it's a speeding ticket or whether somebody just backed into somebody or whatever.
Yeah, and generally for the accidents, it's not speeding tickets, it's usually people not paying attention, shaving, eating, talking on their phone.
That was just one guy.
Yeah, just one. I've seen people putting makeup on, and I've literally seen people shaving with shaving cream and a razor in their car as they're driving down the street. So
They look good, right?
trying to. It's all those things. And the problem is you're never going to fix people not paying attention in their cars.
Do we know of any of these, if any of them were texting?
I can't hear you, David.
If any of them were texting? Because I think I've seen it more, the more they come out with the information about, you see people, people are not even paying attention to go through on a green light. They're just sitting there.
Part of that problem is that I have to prove that you're texting. So if you're dialing to call me, you're not texting. And that's the hard part, because I drive into work and I see people on their phones all day long. is a public meeting, I see my wife doing that, as she's driving down the street. But yeah, trying to prove that somebody's texting and driving is extremely difficult, which is why you rarely ever see that ticket issue. So we have to be able to come to court and prove
But it's
that.
not just texting, I mean, it's dialing the phone too, if you're sitting there dialing that number, or looking up a contact, any kind of phone use is a
But last
huge
week, that
distraction.
semi-truck that knocked, was texting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's a national study, and then I just looked it up the other day from the governors of the Highway Safety Association, that said pedestrian deaths, and there were 28,000 deaths between 2010 and 2015, and they estimate in the last 2 years, and so that's about 6,000 deaths a year, and in the last 2 years, it's been up, and so it's maybe 7,000 to 8,000 people are getting killed, and they're passengers, and it's not highway, it's everywhere. And more than 50% of them are from looking at your phone, the smartphone, or the passenger walking across the street and looking at their phone. So those are the stats, and so it'd be hard for you to pick all that up, Ben, but those are the hard facts. So somebody's going to
I-
Maybe as part of a public education campaign, we could do some efforts, around reinforcing that message about
And
being
our-
on the device.
When we work accidents, the officers are encouraged to write a citation for why the accident occurred. And I will tell you that 90% of the time it's inattentive driving. So,
Okay, bless you. Hop back up to speed tables. We did install one speed table in that raised intersection at Woodson and Johnson Drive. That was intended to slow down the traffic, at least through that intersection. And I think Olson, when they came out last, when they looked at it last fall, as we were kind of looking at the reduction in the speed limit or some other options, I think they felt like those things had not been as effective as we anticipated they would be.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's a common traffic calming device, but then when we've looked at the speeds, I mean, it's hard to do an exact comparison because you can't have it in and out within a week of each other, but just given the speeds that we were seeing on the corridor, we would like to see them 5 miles an hour less than they were, so.
So you have options there, obviously. I mean, obviously the best time to put the speed table is when you're constructing the road. But you could look at increasing the height. If you do that, you may have to adjust your ADA ramps at the intersections because you would be potentially changing the grade. There are temporary options. But the temporary options, I think Olson, as we talked with them, they wouldn't recommend because there are some concerns about snow plowing and the snow plows being able to get through without picking up, your speed tables in that instance. So I think this one, it hasn't been as effective as we thought. It really impacts speed, it is intended to impact speed and pedestrian safety, but probably isn't, going back and trying to retrofit in particular the street with this option.
Was there any discussion about any traffic calming devices? Like, we look at raised crosswalks or any other more physical barriers that would help? I don't know what was brought up back then. It wasn't around back then. But the speed table doesn't seem to do anything. It seems like it's way too long, too wide, whatever. You kind of go up and then you drive. If it was more of a quick raised crosswalk type of situation like I've seen elsewhere, I think that has a lot more of an impact on the speed.
Yeah, I mean, those are the types that you're mentioning, is the speed humps, crosswalks at other locations along the corridor that's a little bit more of that abrupt location than block or whatever.
Was any of that discussed even during the original Johnson Drive planning? Or?
Well, other things that are traffic calming devices are even the roadway width, and the roadway widths are 10 foot. That's a narrowing effect. Tree canopies, chicanes, diverters, all those types of things. The diverters wouldn't be appropriate for Johnson Drive, but even like I said, a roadway width is a common effect.
Then we have the yellow pedestrian flashing beacons, and last year we added the LED lights to those to hopefully make those more visible to the drivers. Pros, it provides the pedestrians with kind of those safe crossing areas, and we've got 3 of the flashing beacons along the corridor at that's right, Beverly, Woodson, and Outlook. Reeds, that's the one I was thinking. So it's a visual signal to the drivers to stop for the pedestrians in the crosswalk. But, once the pedestrians clear that, because it's the yellow flashing light, the traffic can move, since they're not coming or necessarily staying stopped for a long period of time. And they only flash when the, pedestrian pushes the button. What we found is many drivers ignore that yellow warning message. And oftentimes we think the 4-lane design may result in cars in that inside lane not seeing the pedestrian. I think we talked about that last week, where the outside lane stops, and then either somebody behind them is frustrated and pulls out around them and doesn't see the pedestrian. So that, I think, is a concern there. We've spent about $17,156 to upgrade the beacons to include the flashing lights. The others were included as a part of the project construction costs, obviously. Those are solar powered, so you don't need power to install those. They're pretty flexible in terms of where you can put them at what intersection. There's not a lot of cost to move them or add them. It is about $25,000 per crossing if you were to consider adding them at any of the other intersections throughout the corridor. Something else to consider is we haven't necessarily seen that reduces or eliminates people just jaywalking across the street. That happens very frequently. Park mid-block and get out, turn around, and walk across the street to where you're going.
Those are a new device. Before you just had a flashing yellow light. They came out with that rectangular rapid flashing beacon that has a pretty fast sequence on it. They did studies right away after that those compliance rates were very high, in the 90+%. A lot of what Laura mentioned, though, sometimes if there's, how they're situated, and if the inside lane is maybe not seeing it as well as other, that's obviously going to reduce those compliance rates. But that second, I kind of call them second or third generation light, they certainly have been quite a bit more effective than the first generation ones, when you can see them, of course.
We've also talked about the potential for using crossing guards along the corridor, giving that kind of human presence on the street that could assist pedestrians with crossing. That's definitely the benefit. The downside of that is you may not be at the right intersection at the right time to assist the folks who are trying to cross the street. The cost estimate that I included here was based on the conversation that we had previously, saying probably you need to be out there at least 6 days a week. Sunday you probably don't need someone, but 6 days a week, 10 to 5 kind of time frame for about $18 an hour. We've also talked about the potential of using volunteers for that. So obviously if you could develop a volunteer corps for your crossing guards, that cost would be reduced. But if you were looking at about 42 hours a week, you'd be at close to the $40,000 range to put crossing guards. You could also provide some parking enforcement potentially with having that on the street as well. And I don't know, Chief, what you get now in terms of frequency of complaints about parking.
It's very little. In the downtown area, we get more complaints about handicap parking at Hy-Vee and Target and some of the apartment complexes, but in the downtown, we do not get a whole lot of complaints on parking.
Then we included the installation of a hawk signal. This is another option that we have talked about in the past, and that is a red light, which actually requires the traffic to come to a complete stop. They're much higher. If you've been in Merriam at 67th Street, kind of at the railroad track crossing just to the west of that, there's a hawk signal there. I think it's as the trail comes across. It stops the traffic for pedestrians on the trail. It has, I think, a higher visibility, obviously, for your motorists, so there's the opportunity to see that is greater. The hawk signal doesn't really, though, address vehicle movement from the side street, so you're really only just kind of upgrading the visibility of that crosswalk from the yellow flashing beacon. And you could result in some stacking issues if you're stopping the traffic and then having people queue up or stack behind that.
Those signals usually get mounted overhead on the short mast arm. That helps that visibility versus the other flashing beacon, and that is pretty much that sequence of go to the flashing beacon, and then the next step would be to go to the hawk signal typically. Compliance rate just slightly higher than the other beacon.
And you've got a cost of somewhere between $95,000 and $100,000 per signal installed to put those in. And they would require, so the pedestrian flashing beacons are solar powered, the Hawk is not, so you would have to locate it and provide power from KCP&L to operate the Hawk signal there. Next item was to sign the end parking stalls throughout the corridor as compact car only. This is something else we took the steps to do back in February, and those signs have been changed out. The goal there was to help improve the visibility for traffic either crossing Johnson Drive or trying to turn onto Johnson Drive at the various intersections. The challenge, as we talked about at the time, is it's difficult to enforce. We didn't actually take the step to pass the ordinance defining what a compact car is. And so we aren't necessarily writing a ticket for that. And a lot of people have a fairly loose interpretation of what a compact car might be. So I don't know that we've seen had a lot of impact with that change. We've spent about $830 to install that no parking signage. And really, if you come over to the area of concern, essentially there you're just impacting that concern of turning onto or crossing Johnson Drive. The next option, and also in your packet, I had included the report from last fall that Olson did for that smaller Johnson Drive task force, because they did talk specifically about some of these no parking recommendations, including the compact car, and taking it a step further and converting those end stalls actually to no parking, so that you aren't dealing with, somebody who thinks their 6-door truck is actually a compact car. Again, you're improving the visibility for cross traffic or turning traffic. The downside of that is it obviously reduces the total number of parking stalls that are available along Johnson Drive, which has been a concern of the businesses there. And again, you're impacting your ability to turn onto or cross Johnson Drive. One of the other things that Olson had kind of explored or walked through last fall was making Johnson Drive and Woodson a 4-way stop. They also considered 4-way stops at Beverly and Outlook. So obviously a 4-way stop is going to provide more protected movements for your traffic turning onto or crossing Johnson Drive. It's less expensive than the traffic signal. It may be difficult to navigate for drivers to understand at a 4-way stop. But typically you're not going to see that, or if you do have multiple lanes, one might be a dedicated turn lane. So, how clear is it for the driver that is a 4-way stop? Potentially adds delay to the Johnson Drive through traffic, and in the future, if the street would ever go to a 3-lane configuration, the stop signs would not work because it creates queuing or stacking that extends through the next intersection, and so your traffic is not flowing the way that you want to. So it works in a 4-lane configuration, it would not work in a 3-lane configuration. Same thing for the stops at Beverly or Outlook. Then we move into the installation of the traffic signal at Johnson Drive in Woodson. Obviously, again, provides more protected pedestrian and traffic movements. It does add some delay to the Johnson Drive through traffic, but again, it's moving at a more regular pace or consistent pace than a 4-way stop would. As we looked at last week, and the estimated cost all in design and construction is about $307,000. You do, in some respects, aspect all 4 of those areas of concern. And then the last item on the list was the restriping to 3 lanes. Kind of the benefits there, it creates more space because the lanes become wider and the parking, you gain some area on the parking, so you've got a little bit more room to back out onto the street. It can provide a pedestrian refuge in the middle of the street. So if I start to cross the street, then I've kind of got this safe zone in the middle of the street if traffic isn't stopping for me. The dedicated left turn keeps your traffic moving efficiently through without blocking a through lane. And both motorists and pedestrians only have to worry about that one through lane. So there's no signaling to change lanes or any of those kinds of things.
Is that in a bike lane or no?
It does not include a bike lane, because with the front end parking, you wouldn't install the bike lane. You'd just be asking for trouble with folks backing out and hitting the folks in the bike lane.
I don't know. That's been done elsewhere. I think it's worth looking into.
Well, and I think when you see that in the design that you sent me, they converted the parking to back end.
Maybe it was, yeah. I think one thing that, with the 3 lanes, if we did it right, it might at least push traffic a little more towards the center of the road, so that would have a big impact on the visibility, because I think that's one of the biggest problems that we haven't spent enough time talking about here, is when you're trying to turn on a Johnson Drive from most of the side streets, and it doesn't even matter if it's a compact car there, you just can't see. And it's Outlook, it's Beverly, it's Woodson, it's not just one street going one direction, it's pretty much all of them, or the majority of them. If there's anything parked there, you can't see. And I'm a little concerned about why some of that wasn't caught sooner, maybe during some of the initial build-out or design phases, but we are where we are now. I don't know how much that was brought up at that time, but it's dangerous. I know a lot of people avoid Johnson Drive because of it, or take side streets to get to wherever.
Is there any way, Laura, we can go back and look, and maybe we're not part of this years ago when we just caught hell, because our budget reflected 300% increase in revenue due to tickets. People were complaining. After that, and you weren't cheap, but after that point, I'd like to know for the next 3 to 6 months if tickets slowed down because people did. It would be, to me, I think we got to go back at some point to personal responsibility. And everything we're doing, there's costs with it. I am 100% supportive of the light at Woodson. But I think people need to get back and be responsible. And if you keep complaining, people put it in the public eye, don't go there because they give you tickets. Well, maybe at least people will slow down and we'll get the right people on Johnson Drive instead of the people that want to fly by like bats out of hell. Is there any way we could get that information?
I would also like to see, though, of that decrease in tickets, how much of that was traffic along Johnson Drive versus other parts of the city? Because I don't think it was just a reduction in tickets written on Johnson Drive. I think that was a lot more of the city.
And for the cost associated, the relative cost of the estimated $307,000, the tickets that come in and the money that we get from tickets could help pay for that.
So I'm not sure I understand. The time period that you want us to look at, the change in tickets, is when we had the drop-off in the number that were being written?
The 1 year that we had a 300% increase in revenue based on tickets given, I'd like to see the next 3 to 6 months after that period to see if, and we had a lot of, people were mad or convened at us because they thought that's all the police were doing was giving people tickets. But if it slowed traffic down.
But that's not just on Johnson Drive, you're talking the whole city.
Yeah, I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
If we're going to do that, I don't think it's bad to look at that data, but
Right.
we should try to get that isolated to Johnson Drive, because I think we saw a huge decrease in tickets across the board throughout the city, even on 35,
Okay.
Shawnee Mission Park. You can speak to that probably better than.
Yeah, I will tell you back in, I think it was 2009 or 2010 that the city issued, I think it was just over 20,000 tickets. It's a lot of tickets.
It's a lot of tickets.
I will tell you that now, the last few years, your department writes about 9,000 to 10,000 tickets a year. And that's from everything from no proof of insurance to driving while suspended to speeding to inattentive driving to everything, DUI. Your officers are driving your neighborhoods. And I will tell you that back in 2009, 2010, you are having your neighborhoods driven. And that's one of our main focuses. So the tickets, when you guys see the weekly update that comes out, and you see that there's about 200 tickets issued a week, that's 3 traffic officers out working, and the rest of the officers are driving your neighborhoods. I just got the crime stats in for the month, or for the year so far, and we've had 1 residential burglary in our city in the first 3 months.
Nice.
We're the only city around here that's only had 1. Fairway, Westwood, the other cities are having their back doors kicked in.
And you think that's a presence?
And it's because the officers are driving your neighborhoods. Now, yes, back in 2009, 2010, all the officers were out stopping cars and not driving your neighborhoods. And that was the direction from the chief at the time. But I think your police department, you want your traffic people out doing what they're doing, but when you look at these charts, Shawnee Mission Parkway and all is your #1 accident location. And I could sit somebody there all day long and write tickets for running the stoplight. And as soon as they stop somebody, somebody's gonna rear end the person in front of them. It's the way that it works. But this city, as many people that come through here, and we have 3 highways, we average about 1 accident a day. And with the number of people that come through here, it's pretty good to just have 1 accident a day with 3 highways. Because I will tell you that Marion's accident rate, just on I-35, is probably our entire city's accident rate. They have one of the worst spots in the entire state for accidents, and it's northbound I-35 between Antioch and Johnson Drive. It's all the time there's an accident. So we can spend as much time on Johnson Drive as we need to. And Laura was right, the speeding tickets went up because our focus was speeding and not the crosswalks. And the first week that we were out and we had the message boards out and everything else, and we told the media and put out all the public service announcements, that whole first week, every person that we stopped, unless you're doing like 25 over, which is ridiculous, everybody got a warning, which is great. And it's not all about tickets, but we can go sit on 67th Street tomorrow for an hour and write 5 tickets because we haven't sat there for a while. So it's everywhere, it just depends on what you want. But to me, the traffic officers do the traffic enforcement, and my expectation is if they're out working 8 hours, you should be able to find a moving violation every 8 hours that you're working. That's your job. They sit out here and watch the stop sign here, they go over and they watch the stop sign at 61st and Broadmoor. And it's not that they're not spending time down here, but they go to where the accidents are. Metcalf and 61st Street is a major accident spot this year, so we're trying to show more focus up there to reduce the accident. So it depends on what you guys want. I can go out and do traffic enforcement as much as we want to try and reduce the accident rate, but like I told you, we could sit there all day long at Shawnee Mission Parkway and all, and it doesn't matter how many tickets you write, you're not going to make a dent because the person behind that person isn't paying attention, just hit somebody. So you do everything that you can and turn the lights on. We talked about the speed trailer. And I told you guys last week that the speed trailer is great. It's 24 hours worth of service as long as the solar power works. It's $15,000. And Laura's right. Unless you have somebody sitting back there, they're going to become numb to it after a while. And then we're going to have to move it. But it is a 24-hour speed deterrent, is what it is. So, and that's why I tell you that we can put as much enforcement into Johnson Drive or I-35, but we're still going to have accidents. And that's just a real part of this. And it's important for you guys to have all that information because I want Johnson Drive to be safe and I don't want my kids getting run over for sure. But we've had people run over on Shawnee Mission Parkway that have been out jogging. And the speed limit out there is a lot bigger than 25 miles an hour. And we've gotten lucky that somebody didn't get killed up there. So I just think there's a lot of places in the city to look at. That is my point too.
Well, you're doing a great job, Chief, and we like it that way with, more enforcement, like taking the morning tickets, and then you can get right at that for a while. That's great. Don't get a reputation as, we just want your money. We want safety, right? And that combination is great.
Yeah, appreciate it.
The other thing I might do is just have Emily kind of talk about and briefly introduce the Bike Walk KC report that's in your packet, who they were, how they've been involved with us over the last couple of years. And then I know last week there were, I think, a lot of potential questions about warrant analysis and some things from a traffic engineering perspective about how you make decisions about what's the appropriate traffic control device, but I'm sure Todd's going to answer for us. And if you can talk on that.
Sure, and I know we've talked about our relationship that's been ongoing with Bike Walk KC, that they're the metro-wide biking and walking pedestrian advocacy group, and they do all kinds of programs and education, youth bikes, adult bikes. They were who we hosted our Handlebar Happy Hour with last fall, and they helped us host the bike drive for our holiday families. Further back, when we started talking about pedestrian safety and we had our campaign and we were out on the street and we were handing out the flyers, they were there with us, helping kind of provide our talking points, our little brochure we created. before that, when we had the Johnson Drive Parking Task Force, we had Thomas Moorfield, who at the time worked with BNIM, but has since moved to work for Bike Walk KC, speak to us about parking issues. And they do a lot of advocacy, they do a lot of technical assistance, they just talk about how, I think, in a nutshell, pedestrians and cyclists and motorists interact, and they bring a lot of the design concepts and sort of the studies and the observations to you. And we've been talking all along, and they've always had their eye on our area. They really admire it for the walkability that it does have. We're really excited about the Johnson Drive improvements, and we went through the whole construction program, and so we've just stayed in touch, and we're working on some education programming for the spring to help with just some, learn to bike kind of training and things. But as a side note, they've been aware that these conversations are ongoing and that the design pieces of the street are kind of coming back to the forefront and that folks are interested in that kind of thing. And so they offered to create this report, and it was a little more delayed than we expected. We talked about it back in October, I think, and then again in January. And so then, I told them the conversation is still alive and well, and so if you'd want to put together something, feel free. And, they've done it other places, but it's the concept, I think, about that design can be long-term more effective for you in some ways, or solve some of your problems in a more systematic way than some of the enforcement pieces. And so, creating the road diet kind of philosophy of creating an environment where drivers are just inclined to drive more slowly because they just feel like that's a more appropriate thing, versus penalizing them for going beyond, a speed that you want to see, or behaving a way you don't want them to behave because it's just what came naturally, or it's because they were encouraged, or they thought no one was looking, or whatever reason. But trying to use those kind of techniques that they've tried other places or could apply here to just sort of make it feel all the time, whether there was an officer there or not, like that's what they wanted to do. And so they just walked through some scenarios and some of the sort of thoughts behind kind of some of those options. Thought it might be helpful for you. Didn't know quite what to expect from the report when they offered it, but thought couldn't hurt. So they pulled it together in time for this meeting, which I hope helps.
Can I comment?
Absolutely.
Good, thanks. I'm sorry I missed last week. I sent an email to most of the councilmen, I think, and my ability to use a computer is still ignorant. But in the last week, I've got, Frankie sent me something. I've got a couple of comments from some of the people. I almost hit a lady about 3 weeks ago on Johnson Drive and Woodson. And I just, the KISS theory, keep it simple, stupid. And I don't know if there was any agreement last week, or that's probably not, that's why we're here today, is just put that light at Woodson and Johnson Drive, start off with that and see what the heck happens long term. That's my personal opinion. And see if it slows things down, it helps. It's got to help. People are going to be crossing. We got the Mission Project, kids going to the swimming pool. It's the main corridor coming into Mission. To City Hall to pay your tickets and complain to the police department and to people in City Hall, and it's a main corridor. So that seems just simple as it can be, and everything else. We could talk about this until I die.
It doesn't solve any of the visibility problems though, and that's one of the concerns I have, is if we're going to address it. I'm not saying we shouldn't put the light in, I think it might be a great option, but I think we also need to look at what else we might want to consider as a part of that, and if there's any cost break to doing that all at once. Because the light doesn't solve the visibility issue really.
Visibility of what?
Try to turn on a Johnson Drive from
From
a
the
side
side
street.
streets.
Try to make a right-hand turn from a side street onto Johnson Drive from any of the side streets.
So you have to have a stoplight at every.
It helps the
every
one
street.
at Woodson.
It helps what, yeah, it helps.
It helps,
That's
okay,
right.
sorry, it helps one
Yeah.
street, you're right.
Well, it does.
It does.
Which is a main
It helps,
street,
it helps one street.
And I think what Nick's
which is
saying
a
is.
very main street. The swimming pool, he just told you. City Hall, all that is right there on Woodson.
Got it. But it
So
doesn't
that's
help
a-
Outlook, it doesn't help Reed's, it doesn't help Beverly, it doesn't help Dearborn.
It does.
I think it would.
It does.
There's just as much traffic on those roads as on Woodson.
Or, maybe not quite just as much, but they get enough traffic.
It's got to be.
Yeah, and it would help them. If the
It
traffic stops.
doesn't, I promise you, Pat, that
If
a
the
light
traffic stops at Woodson, it's gonna help them.
a light
The
at
other
Woodson makes no difference if Arcie or I go out to Johnson Drive to make a right from our street. a light at Woodson has zero impact on the
What
traffic.
street are you on?
Outlook.
It would slow
So
it
am
down.
I.
It wouldn't slow it down because you got traffic.
It's a block away. Why wouldn't it?
Coming westbound, right?
If it
in there.
stopped the westbound traffic at Woodson, how would that not help you at Outlook turning out?
How would it help us at Outlook?
Well, I think it would slow
Because the
down.
There'd be a
westbound
line of
traffic
traffic that
stopped.
wouldn't be
No, guys,
continually going.
what he's saying is if he's at Outlook, it won't stop westbound traffic for him. Westbound traffic still.
But it will slow it down.
Well, they're
You see
coming from,
stoplights in
well, what I'm
front.
saying is they're coming from Knoll. So
Right.
what Nick's trying to say is the
Right.
traffic coming from Knoll
Right.
is still coming at the same rate that it always
And
has.
I still can't see the traffic coming from Knoll. I think it's
It
kind of
would
what I'm
just
getting
slow it, it would slow it down some.
Maybe.
We can agree to disagree on that. I mean, I'd like to see data on.
Yeah, it would only,
how we think that
it would only help you
would-
if the traffic light changes at Woodson. Then it would help you.
Sure.
But if nobody's sitting there to make the light change, that ain't gonna help you, so that you got a point there, yeah.
I have a hard time seeing that make a big difference. I'm not saying we shouldn't put the light there. I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. I'm just saying I think we need to consider some other options too. And
And if it was
may
there,
come
you'd
with-
have the option of driving down to Woodson.
You're right, I would. It may come with some cost savings though too, if we're gonna do some other improvements to do this all at once. I don't know.
Right.
But I think it's worth considering some of those options before we just decide to go
You and
forward.
Arcie could both do that.
We both could,
So,
yeah, right.
I think one of the interesting things about the two-lane solution with the dedicated turning lane is that it does pull in that line of sight, so where you can see cars coming better at any intersection. And for people crossing the street, you don't have the issue of cars trying to, get around one, or that inside car not seeing somebody trying to cross. So
Yeah, I like the 3-lane option.
it does solve two safety issues.
I think the two factors that are primary, if we are committed to making our downtown walkable, the two factors I think that contribute to the safety is the fact we have 4 lanes. Anytime you have 4 lanes, that just complicates backing out, it complicates turns, it complicates people trying to get across the street.
Agreed.
The other is speed, and we have reduced the speed limit down to 25. So I think we've taken care of one, but it's not having all of the effect that I hoped it was. I was hoping reducing the speed limit to 25 would help us, but I'm not noticing it having the effect that I thought it was going to have. This idea of the 3 lanes intrigues me because if you look at the studies that were offered, that seems to be very effective, and there's statistics behind the studies. Now, I didn't look at all the statistics, but it does appear that those studies are backed by evidence. And I think if you reduce it to 3 lanes, I think you have an impact on the entire section of street. The entire length of that street is impacted by the 3-lane configuration. I would like, you had mentioned that there were public hearings previously on the 3-lane configuration, and we didn't move that direction. Can you give us some idea of what the primary argument was against going to a 3-lane configuration?
Generally, it was a concern that it would reduce the amount of traffic that was traveling along and therefore impact the visibility. I mean, the business would drop off because there were fewer cars that would travel through there on a 3-lane street versus a 4-lane street.
And that was the same argument that was cited in the studies that we were given, where initially it was thought that would have an adverse effect on business, but it was actually proven that it increased business because that area was deemed more safe, and so people were more shopping more in that district.
Oh, more safe and probably easier to back in and out of parking
Right.
spots and some of that stuff there, make things more
But
accessible.
another negative was they didn't want to see beer trucks parked in the middle of Johnson
Well,
Drive.
right, I heard that one too.
Oh, yeah, that was the big one. They didn't want to see a beer park, beer
Just
trucks.
aside from just beer truck, any truck or something that
Well,
would have
the
to
beer was
unload
the big deal
stuff.
for a while.
Well,
Yeah, 3
they always
lanes,
pull around the
right.
side street. They were actually out there today when I was talking to someone about that.
They didn't think they did anything.
3-lane might be, down the road. I think we're going to have a lot of meetings with a 3-lane, because some businesses just don't want it. I think if you put the light in,
Who doesn't want it?
Bob Hartman for one.
Doesn't want one.
What?
He didn't want the 3-lane from North.
But, I mean, once you put the light in, you're gonna,
What's his concern, Steve, if I could just back up?
he said
Parking
it's not gonna
concerns?
work with the parking backed up, so if you have one lane of continuous cars instead of 2 lane, it's gonna be hard to back out of that type of parking.
We're gonna be moving
You're gonna have
traffic
one lane,
farther out, they'd have more room to back up.
you'd have more room to back out, that's for certain, there's no doubt. His thought was, so you're gonna have 2 lanes of traffic into 1 lane, so it's gonna be more. I think we've got a lot of studying to do on it, and
Okay.
a lot of talking to the business people, like Sandy, and, but I think we still need that light, no matter if we do the 3 lane or the 4 lane.
Yeah, it's a separate deal.
Yeah.
If I may though, if you do the light, you're not gonna be able to do 3 lane. Because again, you run into the issue of cars queuing back up through the next intersection.
No, I think you can do the light,
And why couldn't
is what Olson
Or
has.
was that just the stop?
It was
That was
just
a
the
four-way,
stop,
that was
just
a
the stop.
four-way stop condition.
All right, I'll,
Todd, I'm glad you're here.
We did, I don't know if we looked at the combination of, recently of the 3-lane section with the traffic signal. It's certainly going to have a greater opportunity to accommodate that traffic than a 4-way stop.
yes. So, you're gonna need the light no matter what, if you do a 3 lane or a 4 lane. If we go to a 3 lane, it's gonna take some time in getting all that set up with the businesses, with the residents. And, maybe that's the way we'll go, but I think we need a little more time to kind of ease that in. A light, there's nobody that I've talked to except one person said, it's gonna slow me down too much. That's the only person I've talked to that, and 2 of them said it's gonna slow me down too much. Well, they're probably the ones that aren't stopping at the crosswalks also, and my wife is one of them, so I gotta admit that.
There you go.
No, I'm kidding. So, I would suggest that we try the light. I know it's a lot of money.
Can we put that out for bid?
Worth how much?
Can we put that out for bid and try to get some alternative cost figures?
We
Is there an
We haven't
option
even
for
bid
that?
it. We really, that was just an
Yeah,
estimate.
absolutely, we
Yeah.
would do that.
So I have a question too. With this light, I'm for the light, but I want to know, would it be possible for us to get an Opticom installed? And how much that would run us?
It's always a possibility, yeah.
For emergency vehicles and
And I think
such.
that's something that
Yeah.
you get been involved with.
Well, does Edison Company, do you have any other alternatives? Have you got any other ideas besides the 3-way or the 3 lanes or the light?
We've been working, I think very closely with city staff and, working through this matrix of solutions is really the ones, what we're seeing in the road diet's been brought up, that is a national trend that we are starting to see. It's doing, really a lot of what you're looking at here, narrowing that roadway, everybody's going pedestrian friendly. That's really, I think, probably one of the major things that should be, considered. I think it was evaluated as part of the original study, and is a very viable option.
So it's no cheaper to get it done at a later date. It's no cheaper to get the light in now with the 3 lane, or do the light and do the 3 lane later, is what I understood.
I don't think you don't recognize any sort of economies of scale of doing those things together. The only thing you might reduce is mobilization, a little bit of mobilization or overhead or something if you've had.
I think you got design of the signal though.
There's a small retrofit of the signal from 4 lane back to 3. You move the signal heads.
It's not significant.
You move the signal heads over, but you don't have to redo the poles and the foundations and the rest of it, yeah.
Does it require a new traffic study before we have to make any changes like that?
To retrofit from 4 to 3. There may be some traffic studies you might want to take a look at to say, hey, we're comfortable with how all the 3 lane will operate at every location, but to retrofit a signal from 4 to 3 in the future would just be moving the signal master, the signal heads.
On economies of scale, it'd be 2 separate contractors too that would be doing that work.
A previous study indicated that a light was not warranted based on traffic count.
Correct.
And I've heard it mentioned that there could be a liability created if you put a stoplight in an area that's not warranted. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, we certainly look at the national guidelines for recommendations and input on when a signal is warranted and then what we would consider recommended. We looked at those thresholds in 2011, and certainly traffic patterns change over time, but at that time, the warrants were less than those standards. So it's not something that we would just go out and say, we really recommend you putting in.
That was to get federal funds. We checked with 2 attorneys, and there's no liability.
No. You probably have liability if they recommended you put in a stoplight.
Well, I
If
thought
it was
that was
warranted
brought up
and you
at
didn't.
this meeting.
It was.
It was.
Yeah, it was, but
And
it
we
was.
checked,
Okay.
and
This-
both attorneys said, no, there's no liability.
Well, that goes back to the question I asked
It could
last
be
time.
liable, but
Really,
there's
you're always
fairly,
answer.
right, there's always
that?
some risk of something happening.
What'd you say?
That goes back to the question I brought up last time that I frankly don't think I really got a clear answer on. Is how is it that we had to spend the $8,000 or whatever to put a turn signal on Broadmoor, but we're not having to do a traffic study for this? And why is one okay and the other one's not?
That was just my question. When was our last traffic study?
2011,
Okay, so why are we not having another one?
we can.
I don't necessarily want to.
Well,
I want to make sure we're
Well,
not
that's-
Yeah, you're
opening
saying
up
why
to
did we
liability.
spend it
Yeah,
up?
why spend the money?
And if we did, then why did we waste $8,000 on the other traffic stuff?
Exactly.
That's
I'd like
really
to
what my
answer
question
that
is.
question. The difference between this one and the one at Broadmoor and Markway is the fact that the traffic study before at that Markway and Broadmoor signal did not warrant those left turn movements. They were not warranted, so they were not supposed to be put in. Council wanted to look at that again to see if now that that area of town's redeveloped, if the traffic patterns now warrant those protected permissive left turns. The traffic study that we did now says that they are warranted. So that's the difference there. They weren't
But it's the same,
warranted.
no, I
But
understand
the
what you're
traffic
saying.
study that we
Yeah.
done at Woodson says it's not warranted to put the light there, correct?
Yeah, so your question is,
So
why wouldn't we
how is it
spend-
okay to move forward with putting a light there if the study says that we can't put the light there?
Well, but, and I'm going to put this out there because I feel like it's my responsibility to. Based on the information that we have, my opinion, I would not put a traffic signal there.
But you don't live in town, you don't have your children going across that street, going to the pool, and that makes a big difference.
Steve, in
This
fairness-
is not for traffic, this is for safety. And by gosh, I bet you if your kids were going across that street, you would want a light there.
Steve,
So I think-
I've walked my 6-year-old girl across that intersection before, so
Yeah.
I understand.
But explain to us, John, why you wouldn't put one.
Yeah, why would,
Yeah.
Well, because, like I said, with the information that we have, based on the studies that we have,
right.
it's not warranted.
That was for the federal government, that's not for safety, this is for safety.
That was to get some money from the government.
No, I mean, that's
But
it.
I think though, the question is, I mean, we could do another traffic count there, but we did a traffic count in
Well, there's
20.
less traffic there now.
We
because
did a
nobody drives
traffic,
it.
well, we
Well,
drove
we
a
don't know
traffic
that.
count
Oh.
we collected traffic count data in 2015, as I
Correct.
recall. And those, the traffic counts were similar to the traffic counts in the 2011 study.
I think they went down
Down,
slightly.
actually.
They went down slightly, yeah.
So our thought is, in 15, we looked at that data, the traffic volume didn't warrant the signal. In 11, if the traffic volume has gone down, you're not going to, make that same case. We felt differently, which is why, but I think from our perspective, using traffic warrants and traffic engineering recommendations to make decisions about traffic control devices coming from our perspective as a professional staff, we would recommend that we look at and seriously consider that data that's being provided to us.
John, what do you think about the 3-lane configuration? Do you have any opinion on that?
I would say of the two alternatives, it's the better one.
well, let me ask this question. Of the stoplight and the 3-lane configuration, which would be more effective in calming the traffic overall? I guess that's the question we have to ask ourselves. At what cost?
Again, in my opinion, 3-lane reconfiguration affects the entire corridor.
Correct.
Woodson, the signal at Woodson and Johnson Drive
Affects that.
affects Woodson and Johnson Drive.
And if our
It
goal,
affects the other two.
and if our goal is
If
to
you stop
make the
traffic,
city
it's gonna
walkable,
affect up the
then
road.
It
Common
may,
sense.
it may.
But what you're saying is it improves the safety of the entire corridor going to.
That is that is my opinion.
and I would like the opportunity at least to explore the 3-lane before we decide on a stoplight. I know it's going to delay a little, I don't think it'll delay a lot,
Sure.
but maybe a couple months, but I think that we could put out feelers to the business community and find out what they really believe. Because I mean, we've all talked to several business owners, but we've not gotten a collective opinion on what they feel that they think is right for them. And then put on some presentations about the options and the impacts,
Well,
and see if that really is the opinion of the business owners.
I think you're looking at apples and oranges, though. I agree with you that the 3-lane thing, 3-lane option, is definitely going to affect the entire corridor and would make it safer, would make it slower. But that's separate. The light at Woodson has nothing to do with affecting that whole corridor. It has to do with just crossing at that intersection.
Why don't we put a hawk signal up, which is cheaper?
Do what?
Why don't we put up a hawk signal, which is cheaper?
Hey, what's a hawk
Substantially
signal?
cheaper, it's a third of the cost.
What's a hawk signal?
An overhead pedestrian crosswalk signal.
That doesn't much, that helps pedestrians, that doesn't help for the driving traffic.
But you just said that the problem is the traffic trying to cross, the people trying to cross, right?
I said
Safety.
people, I said traffic,
Okay,
because I rarely walk it, but I drive it all the time.
sure.
But if you roll all this together and put the striping and,
It's,
well, and it's not like, I
It's
mean,
two
that's
separate
400,
things, right.
but that's money we're putting on Johnson Drive. And you know, it concerns me a little bit,
Yeah.
especially with the tough thing coming up. Do we have the money? I know Steve says we do have, but do we really have the money? I guess it's my
Do
question.
we have the money to fix streets? First, we're gonna go on with what we have planned, and we can't stop everything because it's tough. I mean, it might be another.
I'm not saying that,
year.
Steve, I'm just simply saying I'd like to make sure that we have the money, because I think we have, I mean, we're looking at salaries, we've got other things coming up, and I think we need to make sure that what we're using the money for is what we need to use it for.
that is a good concern, good. But yeah, I think those two things need to be looked at separately, is all I was saying.
How long does it take to restart if we go through this? John, ballpark it.
I'll answer because I sent the email to Olson earlier today and asked that same question, and probably about a 2-week period, but the street would not have to be closed down entirely for that. It would be
So you
shifting
don't have to
traffic.
get on concrete and use the razor blade.
They'll mill it down, and you would be doing, as I understand Paul's response, then you're using 2 different contractors, so you've got probably spread out the most over a 2-week period.
And then at that point, we'd be looking at the back, so cars would back into the parking, so we could accommodate biplane?
No.
Okay.
No, the 3-lane would just address the actual Johnson Drive itself.
They would have just an extra half lane basically on each side of the street to back out, which you get out that far, it's easier for the people to see you coming out, they see it.
Sure,
And it's easier for
absolutely.
you as you're backing out to see the traffic coming, so.
I just kind of want to,
Visibility.
if we're going to do something, I want to make sure that we do, look at everything. And part of the, bike walk KC is they want to do angled parking where you back in. So you can allow for a certain amount of, so if you want to have a bike lane, people won't back into you when, you go to exit your parking spot.
I think it'd almost be, I mean, can you imagine backing in? I mean, going down Johnson Drive, and I mean, it would be awful hard, I think, Kristen, to stop and be able to back in because you're going to have all those cars behind you.
Well, it's
We
not a whole lot
there's a
different
couple
than
of
parallel.
corridors that we have currently in Kansas City that do that.
It's not much different than parallel parking. I don't really understand how that is a whole lot
You don't
different.
think so?
No,
That's
not at
true.
all.
Really?
The Parallel park, you stop and you
Parallel
back into your
parking
spot.
causes a little holdup.
Causes a little
Travel
holdup,
through
sure.
the Plaza or whatever,
Yeah.
when you're doing all that. But yeah, it'd be very similar to that.
Probably cause less of a holdup because you don't have to pull in and straighten out. And it doesn't take you as long typically.
It don't take me long.
Well, we're not all that quick.
That's true.
But you're gonna lose parking spots with parallel parking.
I'm not
No,
saying
no,
we
no,
should.
you gotta advocate that.
Or backing up.
He's just saying, yeah.
Let me see if I understand the
Comparison.
hawk signal. So a hawk signal is a traffic signal that hangs over the road that will turn red when it's initiated by a pedestrian.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's overhead, it's dark,
Okay,
and then when it's initiated, it goes through a yellow and then a red
Okay.
sequence, yes.
so if we use 3-lane striping and a hawk signal, we accomplish Steve's objective, which is to get the kids, or give kids or pedestrians a safe access across that intersection. And we would still, and with the 3-lane striping, we would still be spending less money than a traffic signal, in theory, with the numbers we have right now.
Yeah. And I would have the option of jumping out, running over and hitting that signal, get back in my car so I can get drunk. No. Yeah, I don't, mine that I did, actually.
Is there somewhere nearby that
Kinda
has
like-
a
I think it's lacking.
that
Yes.
is even like picture?
67th
It's better than what we
Street.
got.
Oh, yeah.
in Marion.
It's by the,
I hate to have.
No.
Think of a better version of the crosswalk signal in front of Pat's house.
there's also on a Main
I'm
Street.
serious.
Yeah.
Everybody stops for that signal every time that thing goes up. I've never seen a car run through that.
Right.
You're right.
And it's just a better, newer version of it.
The yellow beacon probably wouldn't have that effect.
You know, the stoplight would slow traffic down also, and that's what we're kind of looking for too, a traffic light, to even,
No, it turns,
This will turn
it turns
red.
into a traffic
Yeah,
light.
when somebody's
Right.
crossing
Right.
by foot, but not when a car is on Woodson, wanting to turn right, go straight, turn left.
Come
No,
down,
Whatever.
But the 3-lane.
But when it gets
striping
down
will
to
help
3 lanes, that'll help that too.
but come down
It'll
Woodson,
be hard. It'll be
Four to
tough.
It'll
six.
definitely make it easier to
come
see.
down Woodson
You'll be
4
able
to
to
6
see.
and try to cross and come over here to this meeting. I mean, you're sitting there for many
Yeah,
minutes and
Because of the 4 lanes.
Yeah.
But when it's down to 3, that'll
They're
help.
still,
The visibility will
and they're
be
gonna
much better.
lined up, they're still, and it's a major corridor.
I'm just saying the visibility will be much better. I'm not saying you won't have to wait a little longer
I
for
think
the cars to
you need
go
a
by.
traffic light anyway, whenever.
Okay, Olson, what do you think of that concept?
Personally, I think it would be a staged, I think you'd want to at least try the 3-lane, I think that would be the first step. Hawk versus signal is maybe consideration after you would do that.
95.
So you're gonna
I think you're putting costs in front of a human life sometimes.
I do too.
Somewhere there's gonna be one of these kids who don't look at, one of these mission project kids who get crossed over and they've been almost hit a couple of times, so you're gonna put $300,000 and
And the bad thing
instead of a
about
life.
it, that you know they've almost been hit. And if you don't do something about it, it's going to be on you.
I
Well,
think my
a
concern
hawk
was all of
crossing
the
signal
crossings
is
are
doing something
dangerous
about it.
for-
Well, they've also been almost hit at, what?
My concern is
Johnson
all the
Drive.
crossings along Johnson Drive,
Yeah.
from Knoll to Lamar are just as dangerous as that crossing.
Could you identify yourself, please, who you are?
Oh, I'm Sean Bartain, I'm a Mission resident.
Okay,
I also work as a transportation planner.
okay.
And, it's, personally, I think the 3-lane configuration, I think it addresses the safety issue at every single intersection.
Well, the reason it's not 3-lane right now is because there was a lot of, from the businesses, a lot of upheaval about the 3-lane and the businesses. So it's going to be a while.
Well, I don't think,
Going
Ron,
through it.
I think Ron has a good idea. Can we not have a public hearing and have some examples, some posters up and let everybody see this, get some consensus of opinion?
Like they do with the sign committees,
Yes.
like Danielle had the sign, she got the business community together and got some feedback on that.
And John, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, when it talks about the hawk signal, and it's $100,000 per signal, the signal covers one direction of travel or two?
To both east and west on Johnson Drive.
Okay.
So it should say mean, that's the cross, so you're gonna spend that per intersection.
Just want to make sure it's not
Yes,
putting
no, that's a
that
good
cost
point,
in there.
Is that with the electrical? That's the whole ball.
So that would add more expense to it.
No.
No.
No, that's included, the
That's
electrical
included.
included.
So another question, for the existing, the hawk, whatever, the hawk signals, where they are located right now, are they on streets that are comparable to Johnson Drive? I mean, are they on busy streets? I guess.
Yes.
67th Street, busy.
There's one on Main Street,
Yeah,
There's
downtown by
Westport,
Plaza.
Kansas City.
Okay.
We installed one on a similar 4-lane road, was a 4-lane road on Independence Avenue as well, so, yes.
Okay.
It was a 4-lane road?
And,
What is it now?
and still is.
Okay. Check.
So have you had good feedback from it, or have you had any comments?
All the feedback I've seen has been positive on them, and as I mentioned before, the compliance rates are very high, and that's due to having an actual signal going through that yellow sequence and then red, just like a traffic signal.
So, yeah, I think that signal, Steve, would accomplish not everything that the stoplight would, but a lot of it, and the most important part, which is the pedestrians. And then it is $150,000 to maybe $200,000 cheaper, depending on how the bids would come in. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of movement.
That's a lot of money for it, but like I say, a life is worth a lot.
That's
That's
why it addresses that pedestrian crossing.
That doesn't address the vehicle. And you have a
You're
lot
going to
of,
have to start going up to Lamar and crossing.
these older people like myself, they don't use that anymore. They go clear down to Lamar and then head back
That's
east.
not true, I'm older than you are and I use them all the time, so.
Well, you might be a better driver, Susie. Or you're just lucky.
I'm lucky,
You know?
let's put it that way.
But, you know, if you want to go, I didn't know Mission went halfway on things, but if you all want to go halfway on the project.
I don't think we're going
That's
halfway,
right.
I think we're just exploring our options, Steve. I think we need to figure this out, this is a lot of
You're
money.
putting money before safety.
I think we've got I think we've got a lot of priorities coming up, and this concerns me. And I think this salary thing that we're
Yeah,
setting, I think that's.
I'm not too concerned about salaries when it comes to safety of our children. So I would definitely put that safety before.
Okay, so where will the money come from?
Well, we put over $2 million in the fund balance over the last 3 years.
Hold on, Steve, take the money out of this. I think we just had 2 people here that frankly I would say are more qualified than you or myself or just about anyone else on the council to speak to this, recommend, like 3 people, depending on, I guess you work in traffic safety or traffic planning,
They're not looking at the whole
that
picture.
recommended that the 3-lane solution would provide better safety for us on Johnson Drive.
It would be safer than the 4 lanes, I have to agree. But that's not looking at the whole. the whole
3 people that
solution.
said that would be a better first option to look at doing to improve the safety in that area, that do this stuff a lot more than we do. So, you know, I think it's worth listening to those
They
recommendations.
still don't live here and they still don't
Fair.
put themselves in that position.
But your main concern is kids crossing at Woodson.
Sure, it is.
And that'll be
That's
taken
all of
care
our
of
concerns.
with that. Well, that's his main concern.
It's all of our concerns.
Okay, it's,
To characterize that we're not interested in safety or kids'
No.
lives, or I
No.
think is
You're-
inaccurate. We are trying.
I'm not characterizing it that way. I'm talking about Steve specifically here. I know the rest of us are also concerned. I'm saying his main concern is the kids that are walking, and that is addressed by this problem, I mean, by this solution.
3-lane?
No, the arc light.
Oh.
That gets them across the road safely. And your other concern apparently is people like me driving across there. But
But
we
the main thing is the safety of people crossing Johnson Drive on foot.
and that's going to be
The
addressed.
secondary is the vehicles. So we're doing half of it.
No, you're taking care of
Let's
the
say-
major
Let's say we're
concern.
doing 5/8 of it.
You're taking care of the major concern. And
Well,
that's,
can we not just discuss and have this open house or what? I mean, I think that's the first step, and I think we can get the merchants, the businesses there, Sandy, you can help us get the word out, and I just think that's the first step. I think we all want to know how they feel. Let's get some pictures up and show some slides or whatever we have to do, and Olson can be there to answer questions or whomever.
About the 3-lane you're talking about?
Our options, 3-lane, stoplight,
The
hot
hot.
light. Let's just show them our options and see what they all have to think. I mean,
Well, and understand too, it ultimately is a decision of this governing body, because we had
Exactly.
open sessions for roads and all on 3 lanes, and a lot of the businesses didn't want it, and we still pushed it through.
what now?
The 3 lanes,
Oh, well, and they love it.
a lot of them
She's saying they
had
did
heartburn
with that.
with it.
Yeah,
before
I
we
mean,
did
I
it.
agree.
I don't know how many you had that didn't, but I'm not.
And you don't know if they never like now, let's tell the truth.
I mean, I'm not, I just think that we ought to give them a chance to look at it and see what they think.
So let me ask this, last week we also talked about a survey in some fashion. And I know that during the Johnson Drive Task Force back in 2006, and then the Downtown Visioning Committee did surveys that asked questions around some of these areas. So there's some, I think, some good questions that we can use and put together very quickly to put out there. It's not going to be as necessarily a statistically valid survey, but we can certainly get it out to the community and to both residents and businesses. If we look at scheduling some sort of public meeting or open house, do you want to do a survey in advance of that? Do you want to do a survey at all? What would be your thoughts about collecting information that
When
way?
you do this survey, do you just email out to the business owners then?
We could email it directly to those that we have that link to, and I think before, it looked like in 2011 they used SurveyMonkey, and I'm assuming we just put it up on the website and directed people to go onto the website to take the survey there.
Does everybody know what a hog light is? I mean, that would be, I mean.
Would you not have your open meeting and tell everybody about it?
Have one?
And then get their feedback?
That's what I'm asking. Do you want survey
survey
ahead of or following?
Following, probably. Yeah, because there are a couple of good known hot lights.
Because I didn't know what a hog light was. I figured you had a hawk flying over. Hey, we got one too in our tree next door. Maybe we're sending, have you got them? We're gonna send them over to you.
No, I've got the owls too. I'll send the owls over your way.
Okay.
So it's some big dangling light that crossing Johnson Drive?
It's not a dangling, it's a little bit more sophisticated.
Not a whole lot.
It's like a traffic light, but it's just activated by
You want this
crosswalk
one?
light.
Okay, anything
It's a small
else?
picture.
So are we saying that we are, for those who are leaning towards the hawk signal, are we saying that we're doing that because of the price? Is that the only reason?
That's it, price.
No, that's not
No,
why
it's
I've
to get
done it.
people safely across the street.
Right.
It
Well,
takes
that's
care,
another reason.
because it takes care of the majority of the problem.
But it's not going to get people to take a left onto Johnson Drive from Woodson.
With the 3
It's going to
lane
help with the right.
configuration.
There's no doubt it's going to help with
Yeah.
the 3-lane, help with taking a right turn. You're not going to go straight or take a left. It's addressing half the problem.
You got that same problem, as pointed out by Nick, at Outlook and every other.
I don't
street.
agree with that. I think the
Come take a ride
stoplight,
with me and
the
tomorrow morning.
stoplight's not there yet, Nick. Once the stoplight's in, we could determine whether it works or not. But right now, you can't. Either one of us.
Well, I think there's probably comparable things that could be looked at. Maybe Olson can help provide some of that data. I don't know.
Well, did
I
we
just-
ever look, the past traffic study that we did, was there consideration for any kind of a deterrent of going straight through, like a potential stoplight, stop sign, whatever there, so that we would have seen exactly what it did to impact the other traffic on the side streets?
I think I mentioned some diverters and stuff before. There would be opportunities to provide those, I don't think you want to do it at all locations, but if there was a few to say, hey, you don't want to cross, like those crossings, you can take a look at that. I don't believe that was looked at before.
Is it permissible to make comments from the audience?
Yes, for
Everybody
you.
has. Everybody
For you.
has.
I've been listening to all this and tried to be very quiet, which can be sometimes very hard to do. Point number one, you had a study done, there were lights there before, and we know it worked very effectively. And it also pulses traffic. You talked about getting on and off the Johnson Drive street, if you have a stoplight at Knoll, a stoplight at Woodson, a stoplight at Lamar, both flows are pulsed, which gives you more brakes. That's point number one. I've heard about, well, we can't get a study done that justifies it, but if you look at Merriam, at Goodman, you look at Shawnee, just before you get to Hopper Grove, they have cross lights there. And what's it for? It's for the children to cross the street. Now, if you look at the area from Lamar to Knoll, north, they all funnel down, I'm talking about the little ones, to go to the pool. And the natural place for them to cross is Woodson. Now, if you ever watch a bunch of kids, and most parents tell you, don't walk by yourself, get a group. Walk in a group. And if you have a bunch of 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old kids walking in a group, are they paying attention? No. They're talking, they're going back and forth. And I have walked that area a lot. And I can promise you, you hit the winky light and you start to step out, you're going to step right back. Now, kids don't understand that. They hit the winky light and they say, I'm protected. I have a winky light going on. It's okay to go and go across the street. So that's going to be a potential. Now, I hope it never happens, but if it does, it's going to be a crying shame. Now, Darcy lives in an apartment. If you look at the population up there, a lot of people live in apartments. So the population of kids, again, between Lamar and Knoll, because of apartments, is very high. It's a high population. So again, you had the light there before, you know what that was like, and it gets rid of your problem on being able to turn left or whatever at the light, and it protects the kids. So those are my basic comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
I do want to just say that I don't think we know whether a study was ever done when that signal was initially put in. So it may have never been warranted from that perspective at that intersection. We don't have something that says it was warranted at one time. We just had to do that, and I think as John mentioned last week, we had to do a warrant analysis at every intersection. We did one at Lamar and Johnson Drive, and we did that. So that's just something that's a requirement.
But years ago, we did have a light there, did we not?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, and why was it taken out?
Because it wasn't warranted.
to get money,
The
federal money for Johnson
The federal
Drive.
government says that in order for them to participate in a project, you have to follow these traffic engineering recommendations.
But the light was put up far beyond the time that the federal government entered into this, right? I mean, the light was there.
Right.
Yes, but if they're participating in the job, whether the light can stay, if you're spending their dollars to redo the
The whole
corridor.
Johnson Drive corridor.
Yes.
was federal funds. Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
I love EPA. Transportation.
Okay, so we need a little bit of time to get it out so that we have a good attendance, but what sort of time frame would you like to get a public meeting pulled together?
Tomorrow, I think soon, as soon as we
Yeah,
can.
But I think some of these pictures that you got in the Walk KC are really cool.
Yeah, I got you, I like those.
I like some of those pictures in here, and I think those things are valuable. And we could have a little bit of story with them.
What is it, is this on the agenda for the council meeting?
Well, I don't know, you need to make a decision, because you continued it to this meeting, and so I'm assuming based on tonight's conversation, that would not be a recommendation to forward it to the council, but somebody probably needs to just make that official.
Make it official that we're not.
Are you making that? I make a recommendation, we go take, we go to the council.
I just thought that was automatic if it wasn't recommended to take it.
Are you saying?
It's not a motion, you don't
My
second it, it has
recommendation.
nothing to do with it.
Well, you always do it when you're in the other meetings.
Yeah. Those you need. So just to clarify, the traffic light would definitely be my first choice. And through all this discussion, I see the hawk light. How do you spell that, by the way? Is it H-A-W-K? The old hawk light. See the hawk light as a viable alternative to help with the pedestrian traffic
in the meeting, so I'm clear, we'll be presenting the signal, the traffic signal, the hog signal, and the 3-lane configuration, and getting feedback on all of those options.
Correct.
And anything else on this list that you want us to get feedback on, or just those 3?
What about the bike lanes in the backup?
Forget about it.
That can be added later, Ken. If you get a 3-lane configuration, can you not add a bike lane at a later?
I think adding the bike lanes is simple. I think changing the parking to back in.
Right.
Right.
You're re-angling all
That all
that
could
gets
be
tricky.
add-on.
Is that, yeah, you have to mill it down and go different.
The parking is probably the curbs form or angled for the back end, is angled the wrong way in some degrees, because you're pulling in versus backing in. It affects your corners a little bit. The only other thing, it's lane widths. Right now, there's 10-foot lanes. With the 3-lane section, you likely could go to 12-foot lanes. Or if you have the bike lane, it could move around that outside stripe. There's a small chance that it would impact where you put that outside lane striping,
Okay.
which is a cost, as you see here.
Right, understood, yeah.
I would also, if we're going to consider that option, look into it. I've done a little research on it, and I know there is some grant money out there that we could probably look at going after if that was something we wanted to consider in the future.
I think we should all options open.
That sounds good to me.
That's all we have.
That's it.
That's it.
That's all